Chairperson of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a 9-person volunteer citizen board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Our procedure this evening is as follows. First, we will hear from the Planning and Development Services Unit, represented tonight by Mr. John Barrett. Then the petitioner or his or her representative will make his or her presentation. Petitioners will have 5 minutes in which to make their presentation. Board members may ask questions of either the city or the petitioner. We will acknowledge any written comments received by the board. We will allow an appearing party to express their support or objections. The board will discuss the appeal and formulate a resolution to approve the appeal. 5 affirmative votes of the board will be required for an appeal to be granted. Finally, any qualified party who is aggrieved by a decision of the board can appeal that decision to the Washtenaw County Circuit Court on a timely basis. Roll call. I am here. Mike Daniel.
Here.
Dave DeVarty.
Here.
Mike Dobmeyer.
Here.
Nicole Eisenman. Todd Grant.
Here.
Julie Weatherby.
Here.
Kirk Westfall. Charlotte Wilson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Support?
Second.
From Dave. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to minutes. We have minutes from the May 23rd meeting. Are there any questions, comments, corrections to those minutes? Otherwise, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Support? From Julie. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on to public hearings, ZBA 18017, 1501 South State Street. John?
All right, thank you. My name is John Barrett. I'm the zoning coordinator for the city of Ann Arbor. The first and only case this month is 1501 South State Street. Oxford Companies, representing the property owners, are requesting a variance from Chapter 104 Fences, Section 8:434, subsection 1A, Restrictions. The owners are requesting relief to install a 6-foot-tall, 95% opaque fence located along the front yard and the first 25 feet of the rear yard. Fences are not to exceed 4 feet in height and 50% opacity in the proposed location. The subject property is located on a corner lot that has frontage along South State Street and East Stadium Boulevard. The fence is proposed to be installed along the east property line, which is adjacent to the property's rear yard. The first 25 linear feet require the fence to be 4 foot tall and 50% opaque. The applicant is requesting a 6 foot tall and 95% opaque fence. The zoning ordinance requires the remaining 23 feet of fencing to be a maximum of 80% opaque. The applicants are seeking an additional 15% opacity variance in the 95% request. The property is adjacent to the stadium bridge, which significantly raised the elevation of the street right away. If you'll turn your attention to the monitors, the first slide is the location map. You see the highlighted parcel and East Stadium Boulevard and South State Street, and the properties at the corner. The next slide is the aerial map of the property, showing the surrounding properties and existing conditions. This is the next slide that shows a zoomed-in aerial of the property, and the applicants are proposing to construct the fence along here for the and so this area from the front property line down here would have to be 4 feet tall, 50% opaque. So they're wanting to install that 6 feet. And I don't believe the entire fence length along here is 25 feet. So it's the last portion in the garage area to this corner will only require, won't require the variance. Only the 15% opacity. This is the survey that was submitted with the application, and you can see there's the proposed area where the fence is going to be installed. This is a photo that was submitted with the application, and this is the example or sample of the type of fencing that will be used. It will be a wood board-on-board fence. These are the photos that I took when I was out at the site doing my inspection. You see the subject property. This is the driveway, and you can see the raised right-of-way and the difference in elevation between the subject property and East Stadium Boulevard. You can see here where the existing fence is and in relationship to the rear property line, in relationship to Stadium Boulevard and the garage. This is looking at the rear of the subject property, the home. Here's the fence that's existing right now. It's deteriorated and the property owners wish to replace it. You see the survey marker, and the existing fence is, the applicants can speak more to it, but it's, from what I understand, it's not, it's off their property, so they're going to rectify that situation as well and move it to their property. This is directly behind the garage, and you see the existing condition of the fence. And this photo just shows the relationship between the existing fence and the bridge work, the raised elevation, Stadium Boulevard, the construction that was completed within the last year or two, couple of years. Another photo showing the relationship between the two properties in East Stadium. More of the same. And that's all I have. I'll take questions at this time.
Thanks, John. Any questions for staff? Dave?
John, the front, this says along the front yard, which lot line is considered the front yard there, that they want the fence?
All along, so the front is South State Street and all along Stadium, since the property fronts a public right-of-way. It's a corner lot, so when you
So are
front, you're on a corner lot and you front two public right-of-ways, you have two front yards. And so from the survey, from this point right here, this front corner,
Right.
going back the first 25 feet, you have to have a 4-foot tall, 50% opaque fence.
Right.
And so that's where they want to put the 6-foot tall, 95% opaque. They say it's basically 95 to 100. You know, when board on board, you can always see a crack here or there. So that,
Are they proposing a fence on State?
on State, no, that would be in the front yard, the other side. So it's just going to be, see where the dark line is
Yes.
on this survey?
Yes.
Just along that rear property line. That's where they need the variance.
That's the only place
The
they're
the
putting.
first 25 feet, you can only do 4-foot tall, 50%. They want to do the 6-foot tall, 95%. And then the remaining part, that whole line right there is not 25 feet. So the
Right.
next section, you can do 6 feet, 80%, and they're going to do 6 feet, the 95%. So that's that additional 15% opacity. So basically, they need a variance along that whole rear property line. But the first 25 feet, it's a greater variance, the additional 2 feet.
So why does it say a front yard?
Because that,
Is that because of the alley?
because it's this right here is adjacent to the front yard. So anywhere in the first 25 feet.
Oh, I see.
Anywhere in the first 25 feet off a front property line, the maximum height. So in other words, let's just take an example from the front of South State Street. This whole area in here, the first 25 feet, they could only do a 4-foot tall, 50% opaque there too.
Okay. I'm just saying, this is ambiguous. I'm going to try to, in the resolution, try to clarify the language a little bit.
Any
Well,
other questions? Oh, sorry.
I have to call it a front yard because it technically is a front yard, even though it acts as their rear yard.
Can we call it the east property line?
That is,
Instead of
yep,
front
and
yard.
that's what I kind of said in the narrative.
Right, you said that in the narrative.
Yep.
The fence is to be along the eastern property line which serves as the rear yard. Okay. So the alley itself doesn't make it a front yard? Because there's an alley, there's a public right-of-way there that's between, you could see it from the aerial photos.
This right back
Yeah,
here?
see that little space between the green and red there?
Mm-hmm.
And it extends back behind really 4 properties there.
I'm not sure if that's either an alley or that might be an easement. That might be a private easement. And the applicant could probably speak to that. Just, as soon as they're done asking me questions, we'll.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Okay, that's enough for me.
Kirk, did you have a question?
Yeah, just for clarity, so this has 2 front yards,
Correct.
one facing State, one facing the bridge.
East
And-
Stadium Boulevard.
Right.
Yep.
And so where the fence is being proposed is technically the side property line. And the first portion of that is considered abutting the front yard.
Correct.
But this is, so am I gathering correctly the fact that this is unusual because nobody, well, the code does not anticipate situations where a front yard or a corner is actually abutting bridge abutments, so it doesn't really act like a front yard.
Absolutely.
Which brings us here. Okay,
It's a good way to describe it.
okay, thank you.
But every corner yard, or every corner property in Ann Arbor has this same situation where you can only have a 4-foot tall picket fence on both front yards along the public right-of-way.
Right, and
this
you
is
would
just-
think that if the bridge, or if Stadium Boulevard were at grade, we may not want to do this because we don't want tall fences coming right up to a major right-of-way.
Absolutely.
But this is
Correct.
disguised by the fact it's a tall bridge. Okay, thank you.
John, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you go back to one of your last pictures? I think it's the one that shows the fence abutting the column, maybe, that one. Do you know how tall that portion of the wall is, like to the concrete? Is that 6 feet
To right
roughly?
here?
Yeah, I'm just trying to gauge. Would the fence be as tall as that? or-
It's probably close to 7 feet, because I'm
Okay.
6 foot tall, and so I was right in here. And then up to there is probably close to 15 feet of elevation difference.
Okay, so the fence realistically wouldn't be visible over that wall.
The fence is not
Because of-
visible from the public right-of-way, that's correct.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
What's the opacity of the existing fence?
The existing fence would be called 80% opacity.
Okay.
It's a shadow box fence.
Okay,
That's typically what's allowed in a side yard, 80% opaque.
okay, thanks.
Is the fence going to come right up to that wall in the proposed? Because it looks like that flag is the property
That-
line,
They're going to have to install it on their property
Okay.
line, up to the property line, yep, so.
so there'll be a gap for with where the right-of-way is between where the
Correct.
fence ends and the walls.
That's
is.
correct.
Okay.
Dave?
Is there any way we could let them install it right up to the stone wall that's part of our structure there?
No,
Because otherwise you've got foot traffic coming through there.
we don't have authority to grant or to allow fences beyond property lines and in
And
right-of-ways.
actually, when I was walking the property, I was thinking this might be, because there's some public, like where the red car is parked there.
Right.
I'm wondering if I could park there on a football Saturday because it's public. That's in the public, right?
Your secret's out now.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Dave, as long as you lived in Ann Arbor, you must have secret football Saturday parking places already.
Yeah,
I've got plenty of.
Kirk?
Thank you, I'm glad that question was raised. So I couldn't see from the map, does the right-of-way extend beyond the wall of the bridge?
Yes.
does the right-of-way,
Public right-of-way extend south of the wall of the bridge?
so you can see on the survey here,
Mhm.
you see the dark lines, this is where their property line is, and then all this right here is right-of-way.
Okay, how about near where the fence is going?
Pardon me?
So the fence is stopping well short of, so
Yes.
so how much right-of-way is there between the actual bridge abutment, and like,
See, that's.
up to that stake is the corner? Or
That
is it
stake
just
is
the east
that
boundary?
stake is the corner of their property line, so from here to that wall, that will be approximately 8 to 10 feet of right-of-way right there.
Is public passage, I mean, it looks pretty difficult right now, but is public passage allowed? Is foot traffic in theory allowed along the whole length of the bridge?
It's not encouraged, and I don't know how much is going on there right now. I think the applicant would probably be able to speak more to that, but it's not posted, and it's not probably encouraged.
Okay.
And
but
I don't
either-
think it's a heavily trafficked area by pedestrian anyway.
Right, but either way, it's a non-issue because the fence is only going up to that flag. I'm just wondering if there was some future public improvement where we wanted a walkway next to the bridge for some reason at grade, this would not prohibit
That,
it.
yes, that will not this fence will not interfere with any future improvements.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, if the petitioner could please step forward, state your name for the record, and sign in, you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Joe Mifsud. I'm with Oxford Property Management. We're the managing agent for the subject property. And just to, I guess, give a little bit of background on where this started from. It started as a permit application to have the existing fence replaced, because it is in bad disrepair, as you saw from the photos. And it does, in fact, allow people from the alleyway to cut through and actually cross over the property line and onto the property itself. So in the process of submitting for the application, we had the survey completed and determined that, in fact, the fence was not on the subject property. So that turned into an application for a new fence with the understanding that we're more than happy to remove the existing fence along the rear property line. We understand that the fence would only go up to the property line, as you stated, and we also understand that there will still be people, if they want to travel all the way down to the wall of Stadium and to walk toward State Street. Technically, they're not coming onto the subject property in that case, so not really an issue that we can address. But if we were able to repair the fence along the property line, it would keep people from actually crossing into the property and on the property. Really, everything this was great, Mr. Barrett. Thank you very much. He stated was it is what it is. I don't know when Stadium was raised to that bridge. I imagine at one point it was just a grade street, and that is why it was would be commonly referred to as a corner lot. But I believe that this situation is unique in the sense that that elevation of Stadium keeps that fence out of the public eye, those traveling along Stadium. Yes, sir.
Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
Sir, 2 questions. You've not described the 2 reasons why you need a variance. 1, why does the fence have to be higher? And number 2, why does it have to have an increase in opacity? Why do you need those 2 things? Why can't you have a 4-foot, 50% opaque fence? That's the basic question.
Sure, and the answer is twofold: privacy for the property itself, and security.
Security?
Sure. We don't. I don't live there, but if I did, I wouldn't want people crossing through a fence onto my property. And a 4-foot fence for me is relatively easy to get over. 6 foot obviously would be a little bit more challenging. So those are the primary reasons. Aesthetically, we think it'll look very nice, and it will improve the overall look of the backyard for the residents.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Dave?
So you're proposing to remove the existing fence as part of this? There's 2 dead trees back there.
Yes.
I would guess that's somebody else's responsibility, or
We are,
was that the city's responsibility?
we believe so. We have quotes to have them removed. But we haven't had much success in finding someone to raise their hand and say, yes, it's our responsibility to take them down.
Have you asked the city?
There have been some communications, yeah.
Do you know if that, what I referred to as an alleyway earlier on that shot from above,
Mhm.
is that public right-of-way, or is it just an easement over private property?
It's an easement over private property.
And that's gonna bring me back to a question for our staff.
Okay.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Oh, Kurt.
Are there noise issues? I don't know if you've spent time there as part of, I can imagine.
Oh, you mean from the stadium traffic?
Right.
Not that it's been reported to us.
All right, thanks.
Dave?
One more question. I'm just, as I see this, if you're bringing, I know there's a hole in the fence because I walked through it when I surveyed the site. So that would be a reason to replace it all the way to the existing stadium improvement there. But once you do it up to the lot line, there's still gonna be a space there for people to walk through.
That's correct.
So how does that solve your security and privacy issues?
Because they won't be crossing into the subject property. If someone goes around the fence and walks, the assumption is the goal of crossing through there is to get to State Street.
Right,
So if we can force people to go all the way down to I mean, we prefer them not to do it at all.
right.
But this would make people have to go all the way down to the wall and traverse down to State Street that way, without coming onto the subject property.
How are you gonna mark the line on the subject? Because your driveway is really into the public right-of-way.
Correct.
And without the public right-of-way, because of that concrete wall that's showing in this picture right now,
Mhm.
you couldn't drive a car into the backyard without being on the public right-of-way where the driveway exists.
That's correct.
So if somebody's walking through there, how do they know, oh, all of a sudden I'm on private property? As soon as they're on the drive, or part of the driveway is public property.
That's right, but they could traverse from that opening to State Street without ever being on the subject property.
True. I just don't know that they would know that or not.
Fair.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else here to speak on this, please sign in, state your name. Seeing none, we're in discussion. Oh, sorry, go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Post. I'm the owner of the property. It's very important to, this isn't the only property that I own, but it's very important that my tenants realize a great deal of safety and security, as well as nice visual place to live. And currently, because of the disrepair of the back fence and a realization that it's not on the correct property line, I want to correct that. I want to give them more safety. I want to give them something more pleasing to look at, and comply as best we can with what the city requires us to do. This property was an engineering office when they were rebuilding the bridge, and I've done considerable amount of improvement to make it a great place for people to live, for students to live. It's currently occupied by students, so this would help if you could give us a favorable vote on this so that we can keep things as nice as possible in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this? Okay, now we're in discussion. Julie?
So personally, I mean, I was out there and I was looking, and one of the ways you can see this a lot is from the stairs that go up and down to Stadium, and it's the one way you can get to State from Stadium. I would be okay with the 6-foot fence, but keeping the 80% opacity. I'm not, the 90 to 100% opacity, it just seems really almost like, I'm looking at the picture I took there, it would make that feel very much like a blockade, the sort of, the garage with these two sort of solid fences off the side. And the fence you have there now is the 80%. And so along the one side, it's already 80%, and that fence looks like it's in pretty good shape. At least it doesn't have obvious holes in it. But like, I don't mind the 80% opacity, and I don't mind the 6 feet, because I think there is some strangeness how it's set up now. But I wouldn't be in favor of 100% opacity at 6 feet. So I guess that's I don't know if that's a possibility, but that's kind of where I would fall on this.
Mike?
Yeah, I was gonna be my innovative point. Julie stole it. But yeah, no, I'm in agreement with Julie. Like, especially given that they can have, with part of the fence right now at 6 feet and 80% opacity, just keeping that height and opacity consistent all the way across. I'd be comfortable with the 6 feet, but going to 80% for all those reasons that I was about to say. But yes, yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm just not comfortable going to that level of opacity, but the height of 6 feet I would be fine with.
Todd?
Yes, 3 comments. One, this is really a very unique property in a very out-of-the-way, unusual spot. And realistically, they could have a 12% black fence and it wouldn't affect anybody except people just crossing the property for a brief period to get up onto Stadium or down onto the street. There's not really a neighbor that's going to be looking at the property. 2, I think the difference between 80% opacity and 100% is insignificant, but if the goals are, and I'm satisfied with the rational reasons, which are security and privacy, let's just give them what they're asking for. I don't think it's going to be a disadvantage to anybody else in the entire city because of the way this property is situated. So I'm perfectly fine in giving them 6 feet and 100% opacity. I just don't think it's a big deal. Mostly because of the rational reasons they want it, and because this property is right next to this very large raised new Stadium Boulevard. Nobody's bothered by it. Maybe a stray dog will be, but no neighbor's gonna be bothered by this. So this is an easy one for me to say yes.
Kirk?
I guess on the question of 80 versus 100, I suppose privacy can be, and security can be viewed 2 ways. One is, is somebody hanging out behind a fence that I can't see when I round the corner, or, with these shadow box fences, you as you're walking, you can see if somebody's on the other side. So I guess that kind of cuts both ways for me. So maybe I'd like to hear a little bit more about the pros and cons of that. But so, Mr. Barrett, the photo we're looking at right now is facing south. Is that correct?
It's facing east where the trees are and the hole is, and then south where the property line stake is.
Okay, so if I'm standing by the car here,
Correct.
that stake is directly south.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And so, is it so presumably, is the current situation of the dilapidated fence on the neighbor's property, or is it floating someplace in the middle of the easement?
It's in the easement.
It's just, okay. So we would require removal, because okay, so this is where, so presumably there's either public or utility rights to traverse that easement. If this were constructed without removing at least that east-west portion that we're staring at, by the stake, it would effectively cordon off a section of that easement, right?
Correct. And so let's just say it's a private easement, maybe DTEs, which I encounter a lot. That is something that would be between DTE and these property owners. The city doesn't enforce private easements. Okay. And so if DTE ever needed to access their land to do improvements or, remove trees or whatever it may be, that would be something between them and these property owners whose fence it is, and they may actually subject them to removal or do it themselves. So, but when I'm looking at fences and fence permits, I can't enforce easements. So I just look at what's allowed up to someone's property line, and it's up to the property owners to know where easements are on their property, if they're on their property.
Understood. So I'm guessing that maybe some of the tenants in the houses that are sort of on the lower right of this aerial photo, who might be using this private easement to go up and then along the bridge to get to State Street, they will not be precluded from doing so, even if this duplicate fence is being put up, since that is somewhere in the easement, it's not on the opposite property line, so it's not going to block it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
Okay, so let's maybe say this is a DTE easement. Shouldn't DTE be responsible for removing dead trees? Because there's 2 dead trees there.
yeah,
I know they don't care, but I care.
I'm not saying we don't care. I don't think the city goes around and inventories trees and requires the removal of them. It would be so exhaustive and labor intensive to identify dead trees and
Well, not
easements and where they are. So, I mean, the dead trees, in this case it's not affecting the variance right now. So I don't have an answer for you. That's the best answer I can come up with.
Sorry,
But we could help submit a request, perhaps, to like A2 Fix It. I mean, the city refers, whether it's a broken street light or an issue like this, because, I don't know, this tree could obviously damage their new fence if it blew over. We do refer communications to DTE. I think we could help with that.
Yeah,
I would help with that.
Okay. I was going to say, you might have more access to that than I do.
Not my ward, but I'll help.
Julie?
So, again, not to be too persnickety about this 80%, but this does have quite a lot of foot traffic in this area, the bridge access and the stairway down. When I was there were several people, and certainly, on football games, there's a whole lot of people, and there is a neighbor behind it. So I just think that sort of visual of a really, like 100% opaque fence makes it look just less friendly, it's the reason that those things on corner lots, you don't really want. And while you do have sort of you have a big concrete bridge in front of you, it's still an area that a lot of people see. And probably more people see this than your average street somewhere, somewhere that's not on a major road just because of football traffic. So I still am kind of stuck on the 80% opacity, but.
Charlotte?
I would like to second that 80% opacity, just because if someone is walking, at night or something, that's a potential security hazard, I would say, if someone was behind there. And I think for safety of those people possibly traveling along that right of way, 80% opacity, I feel like, would be the best option.
Kirk?
May I ask the petitioner to come up and
Certainly.
react to some of these suggestions? Hi, you've been hearing the discussion.
I am,
Curious.
I did hear. I understand, obviously, we haven't bid that out, and we would have to do that, and it would be a higher expense, obviously. And we'd have to consult the owner, see if that would be approved or not. I do want to just, if I could, bring this up. This is at Stadium in Woodland. And I don't know if this is
These all the same.
yeah. If this is this was, sorry, yeah. I don't know if this was the result of a variance request or not. But that is similar looking fence, from what we would do in obviously a much more trafficked, area. So I'm not sure if historically this board has granted these types of variances before. But Yeah, we're certainly open to the 80% open. Is that someone's house here? I know.
No.
We have to send an
This is-
inspector out there.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
What was the address again?
So, we're open to the 80%. I obviously agree with Mr. Grant that between 80 and 100%, we're not talking about a significant difference here, particularly in an area where not a lot of people are really going to be offended or affected by it in any way.
Question of protocol?
Yeah.
So Candace, are we going to formally require the petitioner to amend his request to 80%? I think we need to do that as opposed.
You can amend the, you can amend that in the motion.
Okay,
If,
but you're open to 80%.
We are open to the extent that
You can
if that's
change
the only thing that we can get approved, then we'll get it priced out. And the shadow box fences are more expensive than planked, dog-eared fences. That's the bottom line. So obviously, we can't make that decision. We have to do our research and present it to the owner for approval.
I guess I'd like to, before we go through the mechanics of amending the motion, if we could hear from folks and how they're thinking, just to save time.
Dave?
My thought is I could go either way on this, and that's why usually I speak and ask first, but held my silence where I was gonna go on it. I can see the votes here with the 80%, and I think I'm ready to make an amendment to make it 80%. I just want to say to the petitioner that I'm working on a fence for my backyard right now because I have a dog that I want to be able to let out into the yard. And I've priced out shadow box, wooden shadow box, and it's not prohibitively expensive. Metal fencing is way more expensive.
Sure.
And I've priced out 3 different types of fence.
Okay.
And I'm actually proposing with the fence person who will be getting a permit from the city to put the fence in. I'm proposing a shadow box fence on my side yards and a dog-eared fence like you're proposing on my rear yard.
Okay.
One thing I will be doing with the dog-eared fence is I will be putting the framing on my side so my neighbors see the flat fence.
Understood.
And that's just a courtesy to my neighbors. And that's what I'm doing with my flat dog-eared fence. And with the shadow box, it doesn't matter because you have the same.
It goes around the postings, yeah.
The same frontage on both sides of the fence. So just hearing what everybody else is saying, I'm going to propose when it's appropriate an amendment to allow 6 foot tall, 80% opaque fence in this. And when people are done with discussion, I'll make that motion to amend. Or I'll make it a
So I think I'm still having trouble understanding why the 80% opacity matters, and I'm wondering if one of the advocates for that could maybe help me understand it a little more. The way I'm seeing this, there's going to be a space between the elevated portion of the stadium, kind of the wall there, and where this fence will end. That's kind of a public area where people can walk through. If I'm hugging kind of the wall of stadium and walking through, I still don't, I guess I don't understand why the opacity of the fence matters all that much. And then the other thing I'll mention is, and maybe this is a question for staff or somebody, is how much overlap do we have between where the garage ends, that's kind of backing up to this fence, and how much length of fence will we have that's actually in play that we need to worry about the opacity for? And when I say that, I mean the garage is obviously a block wall that we can't see through, so.
I think that's a photo.
So that's my comment.
Mike?
Yeah, I just think it looks like a fortress. I like to have some opacity in fences, and That's the thing. If you have someone walking behind along the east side of the house, you have some ability to see a figure there or a dog or something with 100% opacity. You have none. That's where I'm at.
And just to put a point on that, generally for pedestrians approaching, you know, a solid fence at a 90-degree angle, it can be anxiety-inducing not being able to see around. So with the shadow boxing, you can see a figure on the other side.
And again, I'm not invested one way or the other, but I believe if we have it in our ordinances, we should try to cue as closely as we can, unless there's a significant reason not to.
Okay.
And in this case, that weighs for me in favor of the 80%.
So, just a clarification, would people be walking down the private easement and approaching the intersection kind of from a 90-degree angle, or would they just be walking through along the public right-of-way there? And then just secondly, I'm leaning towards agreeing with what others have said, primarily because of Dave's reasoning. I agree with that stance, so. That's my next comment and question.
Yeah, I think for me, and I mean, some of it is looks and some of it, but it's also in our ordinance is 80% opacity, and I don't see a reason that this should be more than that. There's no, to me, it's actually quite a public area. I walk by there a lot, I go by there a lot, which seems weird because you'd think that there's a big block in front of it, but that is the sidewalk for Stadium. And you can easily look down, and I don't see a reasoning to have it be more than the 80% that it would be required, so.
Okay. One more comment. So the current code requires 50% up to a certain point, so we're still making a variance from that.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying that. Okay.
Any other discussions? Are we ready for a motion? Dave?
I'll make the motion. I'm just going to include it in the given motion. Petition ZBA 18-017, 1501 South State Street, variance. Based on the following findings of fact and in accordance with the established standards for approval, the Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the following variances from Chapter 104 fences, Section 8:434, 1A. To allow a 6-foot tall, 80% opaque fence to be installed in the front yard. The fence is to be installed along the eastern property line, which serves as the rear yard for this subject property. After a hearing in accordance with the established procedure of the board, in its sound discretion and in the interest of the public health, safety, or welfare of the inhabitants of the community, reduce or remit the requirements of this chapter in individual cases.
We have a motion. Do we have support?
Second.
Support from Todd. Mike Daniel.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes.
Mike Detmer.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Julie.
Yes.
Kirk.
Yes.
Charlotte.
Yes.
I also vote yes. The request is granted. Moving on, we have no unfinished business, no new business. Reports and communications, I will note that we did receive a memo from Brett Leonard, the planning manager, regarding the Traver Lakes neighborhood. So if everyone would like to review that, and of course, feel free to contact staff with any questions.
Can I make a communication?
Oh, yeah, go for it, Dave.
Given information tonight, it looks like we have a fence in violation of city code at the corner of Woodland and Stadium Boulevard. And I'd like to submit this as an official complaint to be investigated to see what we can do to cure the situation.
Thank you.
Making friends.
Any other reports or communications? There's no one left here for public commentary, so do I have a motion to adjourn? From Mike, support? From Julie, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
If you